Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Semester 5 students. In the last lecture, we started phonology, the patterns of sound, how the sounds are produced. We stopped at the plural form. Today, we'll begin with exceptions to the plural rule. What is the rule of making plurals? Page number 71. No rule is so general which admits not some exception. We discussed the same quotation in the last lecture. कि ऐसा कोई rule नहीं है कि जिसमें कोई exception ना हो. As we noted at the beginning of this section, some words are exceptions to the general pattern. The regular plural rule does not work for words like child, ox, woman, for mouse and sheep. Children often learn these exceptional plurals after they have discovered the regular rules, which they acquire at a very early age. The late Harry Hoyder, a well-known anthropological linguist, used to play a game with his 2-year-old daughter. He would say a noun and she would give him the plural form if he said the singular, and the singular if she heard the plural. So, it's a game which you can also play with your friend, with your brother, with your sister at home, with your father, with your mother, anyone. You give singular, the other one speaks plural. You give plural, the other one gives singular. He would say, okay, one day he said ox, and she responded auk. Apparently not knowing the word and thinking that the s at the end must be the plural suffix. As we will see later, children also sometimes regularize exceptional forms, saying mouses and sheep, because it is a general idea that addition of s and es makes the plural form. And many people at a very older age also might have the same concept if they are not briefed, if they are not told, if they don't learn that there is some difference somewhere. This is evidence that the rule exists as part of the mental grammar. Which grammar it is? Mental grammar. Based on education that you gained earlier. The knowledge that you had before, that makes mental grammar. The idea is there, the notion is there, and you are using it. If the grammar represented each unexceptional or regular word in both its singular and plural forms, for example, cat, cats, cap, caps, and so on, it would imply that the plurals of cat and cap are mentally the same as the regular plurals of child and ox. Of course, they are not. If a new toy appeared on the market called a glick, a young child who wanted 2 of them would ask for 2 glicks, even if the child had never heard of the word glicks. The child knows the regular rule to form plurals and need not learn the plural of each noun. Children learn the exceptions and that knowledge remains for a lifetime. Experiments conducted by linguists show that very young children can apply this rule to words they have never heard. A grammar that describes such knowledge, the internalized mental grammar, must then include the general rule. As I have said you earlier that this method, trial and error method, is applicable at almost all the things except a few. This is what is present in mental grammar. And you tend, you make effort, you try. Maybe it's wrong, but it can be right as well. So this thing should be there in your mind, that you have to make effort. You don't have to be stagnant, because if you keep on moving, things will be smooth enough. So don't give up. Try as much effort as you can. Next is allomorphy in English. Allomorphy in the language. In this section, we will discuss two more examples of rule-governed allomorphy in English. We will not make a chart of all the environments in which each allomorph occurs, and then simplify the chart by looking for properties that are shared by the environments that select a particular allomorph. Instead, we will focus on the end products of that type of analysis, the rules that determine the context in which each allomorph occurs. How allomorphs are used. The formation of the regular past tense of English verbs has some interesting parallels with the formation of regular plurals. Recall the past tense spellings, like plurals, may be misleading as to the actual pronunciation. Here we have 4 rows. Grab, hug, seat, love, buzz, rogue, judge, fan, ram, long, kill, care, tie, bow, hoe. Read, peak, unearth, huff, kiss, wish, pitch. State, raid. Is, run, sing, have, go, hit. Now, the instructions are given at the end. In the first row, first column, what you have to do is, you have to add D in the words appearing in A. You have to add T in B. You have to add ED in C. अब स्टेट में ईडी नहीं आएगा, स्टेट में ओनली डी, लेकिन रेड में ईडी आएगा. और जो लास्ट वन है डी, इज, रन, रिंग, सिंग, हैव, गो, हिट, इनमें पास्ट फॉर्म कुछ और होगी. इज की वॉज, रन की रैन, सिंग की सैंग, हैव की हैड, गो की when, hit की hit ही रहेगी. So there are certain real rules that are followed to make past as well, like in plurals. The productive regular past tense morpheme in English is pronounced D, which is added in column A, T in column B, or ED in column C, depending on the final segment of the verb to which it is attached. Try to hear these differences by pronouncing the past tense forms yourself. The column D verbs are exceptions, as I said. The following rules describe these variations in the pronunciation of the regular past tense morpheme. Now we have 2 rules. The first one, while making past tense, the first rule is insert a when a regular verb ends in an alveolar stop. Giving ed. Change the past tense morpheme to a voiceless when a voiceless sound precedes. And then there is the second rule: change past tense morpheme to a voiceless T. The past tense morpheme has the basic form D, pronounced D, if no rules apply. Like the rules for the regular English plural, the rules for the regular past tense are morphophonological, because they apply to the past tense morpheme specifically, not to all morphemes in English. The English negative prefix in, which, like un, means not. In and un, you don't know, prefixes added before the word. Both means not, or you can say they are negative morphemes. Now, in comes in what conditions? It comes before vowels and before alveolars. Like, for example, inexcusable, inattentive, intolerable, identifiable, indefinable, innovation, insurmountable. Another morpheme, im. Im comes before labials: impossible, imbalance, immaterial, when both lips join. In comes before veilers: incomplete, inglorious. The pronunciation of this morpheme is often revealed by the spelling as im when it is prefixed to morphemes beginning with P, B or M. Because we have no letter in our alphabet, the veiler is written as N in words like incomplete. You may not realize that you pronounce the N in inconceivable, inglorious, incongruous, and other such words as, because this rule is as unconscious as other rules in your grammar. It is the job of linguists and phoneticians to bring such rules to consciousness or to reveal them as part of the grammar. If you say these words in normal tempo without pausing after the in, you should feel the back of your tongue rise to touch the velum. The rule that accounts for the pronunciation of the in prefix is called the Homogeneic nasal rule. Homogeneic nasal rule. Adding in. Homogeneic meaning some place, because the nasal consonant is produced at the same place of articulation as the following consonant. Change the place of articulation of a nasal consonant so that it agrees with is the same as the place feature of articulation of a following consonant. With this rule, we can give the in negative prefix morpheme the basic representation. Before vowels and before morphemes beginning with T or D, the Homogeneic nasal rule has no effect on the basic form. The rule changes the alveolar feature of N to labial before a morpheme beginning with a labial consonant P, B or M to agree with the place of articulation as in impossible and immodest. Similarly, this feature changing rule changes alveolar to velar. So the N is pronounced as a velar nasal before morphemes that begin with the velar consonants K or G in words like incoherent. of language. He says on page number 74, in the physical world, the native speaker and hearer actualize and are sensitive to sounds. But what they feel themselves to be pronouncing and hearing are phonemes. They are sensitive to sounds since they are the native speakers of the language. And what they pronounce, the way they pronounce a word, that is called phonemes. The phonological rules that we discussed in the preceding section apply only to particular morphemes. However, there are other purely phonological rules that can apply in principle to any morpheme in the language. These rules reveal the activity of phonology in an even more striking fashion than those we saw previously. To discuss these rules, we first need to introduce some additional phonological concepts. This section introduces the notions of phoneme and allophone. Two things. One is phoneme, one is allophone. यहाँ था allomorph. Constantly keep revising your previous knowledge. Phonological rules apply to phonemes to produce variants or allophones in different environments. Phonemes are the individual sounds that appear in what we have been calling the basic form of morphemes. Phonemes क्या है? Individual sounds हैं. Individual sounds of the words that we have been pronouncing earlier. Phonemes are abstract mental units. Allophones are the actual pronunciations of those abstract units in different environments. Phonemes are abstract units. Allophones क्या हैं? They are actual pronunciation of those phonemes. First is vowel nasalization. Vowel nasalization. Our first example of a purely phonological rule, one that is not sensitive to morphology, determines the context in which vowels are nasalized in English. The following examples show this. First is bean, roam. The sound of vowel being pronounced through nasal cavity. There is a general rule of English that tells us that when nasalized vowels occur, always before nasal consonants, never before oral consonants. We do not have to learn that the nasalized versions occur in bean, boom, and bomb. Excuse me. Now these three words, bean, boom, bomb. If you see, our nasal cavity is involved in pronunciation. Rather, we generalize from the occurrences of oral and nasal vowels in English and form a mental rule that automatically nasalizes I and U and all other vowels before nasal consonants. The general principle that predicts when a vowel will be oral and when it will be nasal is exemplified in the table given here. Which words will make the vowel sound a nasal sound? As the examples in this table illustrate, oral vowels in English occur in final position and before non-nasal consonants, nasalized vowels occur only before nasal consonants within the same syllable. The non-words show us that nasalized vowels do not occur finally or before non-nasal consonants, nor do oral vowels occur before nasal consonants. We can state these generalizations in a more concise way with the following phonological rule. The syllables referred to in this rule are similar but not identical to those found in dictionary entries. We will discuss how linguists define syllables later in the chapter. A vowel or diphthong becomes nasalized before a nasal sound within the same syllable. This rule makes explicit the fact that nasalized vowels occur in English syllables only before nasal consonants. If one substituted oral vowels for the nasal vowels in bean and roam, the meanings of the two words would remain the same. Try to say these words keeping in your velum up until your tongue makes the stop closure of the lips come together for the M. It will not be easy because in English we automatically lower the velum when producing vowels before nasals in the same syllable. Now try to produce bead and robe with a nasal vowel. Bead and robe. The pronunciation bit would still be understood as bead, although your pronunciation would be heard as being very nasal. And people might say you had a nasal twang. In short, the oral and nasal variants of a given vowel can be substituted for one another without changing the meaning of a word. But notice that different vowels cannot generally be substituted for one another without change in meaning. For example, if you try to produce the word beat with the vowel instead of I, you would be understood as saying beat in a strange way. Rather, you would be understood as saying a completely different word, namely bad. To put it another way, we can find minimal pairs of words such as beat and bad that have different meanings and whose pronunciations differ only in that one has I in the position where the other has E. The sounds I and E can therefore distinguish or contrast words. They are distinctive sounds in English. Such distinctive sounds are called phonemes. The following list of words illustrates some of the other vowel phonemes of English. The words in the list differ only in their vowels. Each vowel thus represents a distinct phoneme. Beat, bit, bait, bet, bad, bite. The vowels U and E, which do not appear in the list above, are also phonemes of English. They contrast meanings in other minimal pairs. They are mentioned there, you can see them. The diphthongs are considered single vowel sounds, although each includes a glide because they function like the monophthongal vowels, as further illustrated by the following list that includes all three diphthongs: bi, vowel, boil. Phonemes are not physical sounds, they are abstract mental representations of the phonological units of a language. The units used to represent the forms of words in our mental lexicons. The phonological rules apply to the phonemic representation to determine the pronunciations of the words. Now that we have introduced the concept of a phoneme, we return to the topic that began this section: oral and nasalized vowels in English. Do the oral and nasalized versions of the same vowel qualify as different phonemes? The answer is no. The oral and nasalized variants of a vowel are not distinct phonemes. We saw that changing an oral vowel to a nasalized vowel or vice versa does not change the meaning of a word, although it will make your pronunciation sound odd. Another way of saying the same thing is that oral and nasal vowels do not contrast in English. Yet another way of putting it is that there are no minimal pairs in English that differ only in that one member of the pair has the oral version of a vowel, while the other member of the pair has the nasalized version of the same vowel. However we say it, the conclusion is the same. There is just one set of vowel phonemes in English. Each member of that set has an oral version or allophone and a nasalized version or allophone. A particular version or realization of a phoneme is referred to as a phone, a sound. The different phones that are the realizations of the same phoneme are called the allophones of that phoneme. An allophone is therefore a predictable phonetic variant of a phoneme. Predictable phonetic variant of a phoneme. In English, each vowel phoneme has both an oral and a nasalized allophone. The choice of the allophone is not random or haphazard. It is rule governed. There are certain rules that are followed, that are kept under consideration before assigning it a allophone. To distinguish between a phoneme and its allophones, the ways in which the phoneme is pronounced in different contexts, we use slashes to enclose phonemes and continue to use square brackets. For allophones or phones, for example, I and E, are allophones of the phoneme I, and are allophones of the phoneme, etc. Thus, we will represent bead and bean phonemically as bead and bean. We refer to these as phonemic transcriptions of the two words. The rule for the distribution of oral and nasal vowels in English shows that phonetically these words will be pronounced as bead and bean. The pronunciations are indicated by phonetic transcriptions and written between square brackets. In an earlier chapter, we mentioned another example of allophones of a single phoneme. We noted that some speakers of English substitute a glottal spot for the T at the end of words such as don't or can't, or in the middle of words like bottle or button. The substitution of the glottal stop does not change the meanings of the any words. Don't and don't do not contrast in meaning, nor do beetle, battle. On the other hand, rebel and rabble do contrast as the pronunciation of rabble and rattle, but rattle with a T or rebel with a flap or with a glottal stop are all possible pronunciations of the word rattle, rattle, rattle. The phones TR and this do not contrast. They all are allophones of the phoneme. So one word can have different pronunciations, can have different phones, different sounds, but it does not change the meaning. In the preceding discussion, we used minimal pairs to determine which vowel phones are and are not phonemes of English. We can do the same for the consonant phones that occur in the language. For example, fine, wine, and chunk and junk are minimal pairs in English. These are therefore allophones of different phonemes in English, which we may write with these symbols. Seed and soup are not a minimal pair because they differ in two sounds, the vowels and the final consonants. It is therefore not evident as to which differences in sound cause the differences in meaning. Bar and rod do not constitute a minimal pair because although only one sound differs in the two words, the B occurs initially and the D occurs finally. However, D and P do contrast in the minimal pair deed and deed. And B and D contrast in the following minimal pairs as mentioned in the rest: bead, bow, rube, lobe. Substituting a D for a B changes both the phonetic form and its meaning. B and D also contrast with G as in bill, dill, gill, rib, rid, rig. Therefore, B, D, and G are all phonemes in English, and Bill, Dill, and Gill constitute a minimal set. A minimal set of vowels is illustrated in the BC cartoon below, namely in crick, creak, crook, crow. If you see the pictures, I have a crick in my neck. It's probably from sticking your neck in the creek. I would expect that from a crook. I hope you croak. One could easily extend this set to include as in crake, crack, or and crop. We have many minimal sets in English, which makes it relatively easy to determine what the English phonemes are. In some languages, particularly those with relatively long words of many syllables, it is not as easy to find minimal sets or even minimal pairs to illustrate the contrasting sounds and thereby identify the phoneme set. Even in English, which has many monosyllabic words and hundreds of minimal pairs, there are very few minimal pairs in which the phones contrast. Though we know English has the phonemes, in a computer search, only one pair was found in which they contrast at the beginning of words, one in which they contrast in the middle of words. Next topic is the rules that are monitored regarding phonology. He says, but that to come shall all be done by the rule. Whatever we are going to formulate, whatever we are going to create, there has to be a certain rule that has to be followed for creating a novel thing. Same is the case over here. In phonology also, we have to follow certain rules. Now, what are those rules? To come in a very brief thing first, the first rule is assimilation rules. Rules of phonology. The first one is assimilation rules. How we assimilate, join, combine. Second one is feature changing rules. Third one is dissimilation rules. Then comes feature addition rules. Fifth one, segment deletion and insertion rules. Then movement rules. Now these 6 rules are to be followed when we are proceeding in it. Then comes another one, the function of phonological rules. A very important thing. Today, out of these 6 rules, we'll be studying only one. The rest will continue to be kept under consideration. That is assimilation. Rules. How to assimilate? Throughout this chapter, we have emphasized that the relationship between the phonemic representations of words and the phonetic representations that reflect the pronunciation of these words is rule governed. So, let's begin with the rule. Assimilation rules. We have seen that nasalization of vowels in English is a non-phonemic because it is predictable by rule. The vowel nasalization rule is an assimilation rule or a rule that makes neighboring segments more similar by copying or spreading a phonetic property from one segment to another. For the most part, assimilation rules stem from articulatory or physiological processes. There is a tendency when we speak to increase the ease of articulation, that is to articulate efficiently. We ease of articulation. We try to feel comfortable, that is to articulate efficiently. We have noted that it is easier to lower the velum while a word is being pronounced before a nasal stop closure than to wait for the actual moment of closure and force the velum to move suddenly. We now wish to look more closely at the phonological rules we have been discussing. Previously, we stated the vowel nasalization rule as nasalize vowels when they occur before nasal consonants. This rule specifies the class of sounds affected by the rule. It states that phonetic change will occur by applying the rule. Change phonemic oral vowels to phonetic nasal vowels, and it specifies the context or phonological environment before nasal consonants within the same syllable. All three kinds of information, class of phonemes affected, phonetic change, phonological environment. Three different informations. One, phonemes affected. Sound changed. Second, phonetic change. That we observe is phonetic change. Third one, phonological environment. Must be included in the statement of phonological rule, or it will not explicitly state the regularities that constitute speakers' unconscious phonological knowledge. Phonologists often use a shorthand notation to write rules, similar to the way scientists and mathematicians use symbols. Every physicist knows that E is equal to mc square means energy equals mass times the square of the velocity of light. Children know that 2 plus 6 is equal to 8. Can be stated in words as 2 plus 6 equals 8. We can also use such notations to state the nasalization rule as V vowel plus nasal. Plus nasal. Consonant. The arrow abbreviates becomes. The segment on the left of the arrow becomes or takes on any feature on the right of the arrow. In the specified environment, it means that a vowel becomes nasalized or takes on the feature plus nasal. The environment follows a vowel becomes nasalized or takes on the feature. The environment follows the slash, and in this case indicates that the vowel to be nasalized must be followed by a nasal consonant. The plus nasal part, and optionally by any consonant, the C part. And then the syllable must end, indicated by the dollar sign. We'll discuss syllables in more detail below. For example, the condition is met in the word damn because the vowel precedes a nasal consonant at the end of that syllable and word. The condition is also met in the word damn because the vowel precedes a nasal consonant and another consonant whose presence or absence doesn't affect nasalization. The condition is not met in a word like dab because B is not nasal. Nor is it met by doesn't insofar as the O is concerned. Because the nasal is in a different syllable, the parenthesis surrounding the C denote optionally. That is a don't care condition. If the optional C were not there, however, the rule would not apply in words like damn or damn. Because the nasal consonant is not followed by dollar, but by another segment. Technically, our rule is not quite complete. It doesn't take words like dumps into account, where two consonants become between the nasal and the syllable boundary. What occurs on the left side of the arrow fulfills the first requirement for a rule. It specifies the class of sounds affected by the rule. What occurs on the immediate right side of the arrow specifies the change that occurs, thus fulfilling the second requirement of a phonological rule. To fulfill the third requirement of the rule, the phonological environment where the rule applies, we use the underscore to denote the position of the segment to be changed relative to the conditioning environment. Then the conditioning environment is symbolized. In this case, the segment to be changed precedes the nasal consonant and possibly another consonant and is in the same syllable. That's what nasal CS means. So, a brief explanation of this rule. Moving on, in summary, the arrow means becomes or is changed to. Slash means in the environment of. Underscore is placed before or after the segments that condition the change. This environment changes the whole case. Parentheses and close optional segments whose presence or absence are relevant in this rule. Dollar indicates a syllable boundary. A new syllable is added. The nasalization rule, stated formally using symbols, can be read in words. A vowel becomes nasalized in the environment before a nasal segment, possibly followed by a consonant in the same syllable. Any rule written in formal notation can be stated in words. The use of the formal notation is, as stated above, a shorthand way of presenting the information. Notation also reveals the function of the rule more explicitly than words. It is easy to see in the formal statement of the rule that this is an assimilation rule, since the change to nasal occurs before nasal segment. Assimilation rules in languages reflect co-articulation, the spreading of phonetic features either in the anticipation or in the preservation, the hanging on of articulating processes. This tendency may become regularized as rules of the language. The following example illustrates how the English vowel nasalization rule applies to the phonemic representation of words and shows the assimilated nature of the rule. That is, the change from the nasal feature value of the vowel in the phonemic representation to a nasal in the phonetic representation. Now here in the chart, you can see phonemic representation, nasality, phonemic feature value, apply nasal rule, nasality, phonetic feature value, phonetic representation. There are many other examples of assimilation rules in English and other languages. Recall that the voiced Z of the English regular plural suffix is changed to S after a voiceless sound, and that Similarly, the voiced D of the English regular past tense suffix is changed to T after voiceless sound. We can describe both of these changes within the following morphophonemic rule, which is notation, voice, voiceless, change to this is morphophonemic rule. Words. A voiced segment becomes voiceless. A voiced segment becomes voiceless when the preceding segment is voiceless. Application to this rule is restricted to the plural and past tense morphemes. Another morphophonemic rule that we discussed earlier in this chapter changes the place of articulation of the English negative prefix in to be the same as the place of articulation of the following consonant. Recall that this rule also applies to the negative morpheme in the West African language Akan. Although the formal statement of this rule is too complicated to give here, its function is essentially the same as the rule immediately above. Both rules make two consonants that appear next to one another more similar. There is an optional free variation assimilation rule in English that applies particularly in fast or casual speech. The rule devises the nasals and liquids in words like snow, slow, smart, pro, row, and so on. The feature voiced of the S or P preserves, perseveres, or hangs on through at least part of the following set. Because voiceless nasals and liquids do not occur phonemically, do not contrast with the voice counterparts, the vocal cords need to react quickly. The devoicing will not change the meaning of the word slap, and both mean slot. Vowels may also be devoiced or become voiceless in a voiceless environment. When you whisper, you make all the sounds voiceless, including the vowels. So try whispering if you are wondering what a voiceless vowel might sound like. In Japanese, high vowels are devoiced when preceded and followed by voiceless obstruents. In words like sukiyaki becomes a voiceless or whispered you. This Japanese assimilation rule can be stated as follows. This is Japanese rule. Makes voiceless sonorant, voiceless underscore sonorant, voiceless. This rule states that any Japanese vowel, a segment that is non-consonantal and syllabic becomes devoiced in the environment of or when it occurs between voiceless obstruents. Notice that the underscore does not occur immediately after the slash or at the end of the rule, but between the segment matrices represented as sonorant voice. This rule requires three kinds of information. The class of sounds affected are vowels. The phonetic change is devoicing, and the phonological environment is between two voiceless obstruents. The rule does not specify the class of segments to the left of the arrow as voiced, because phonemically all vowels in Japanese are voiced. It therefore simply has to include the change on the right side of the arrow. We can illustrate the application of this Japanese assimilation rule as we did the English vowel nasalization rule. The chart is given below. Till here, go through your text, try to comprehend the information, and if you have any question, you can come up on WhatsApp group. Thank you.